Hello, everyone. My name is Coleman and welcome back to On What Matters, the show where we talk about the greatest forces, challenges, and opportunities in the 21st century, and what we can do in order to hopefully bring about some good. This is part one of my two-part interview with TTotal. T is a anonymous blogger and author with a background in computational science, specifically focusing on material science simulations. And T writes commonly on the Effective Altruism forum, as well as his own blog, on topics surrounding critiques of effective altruism and existential risk, especially existential risk from nanotechnology and of AI. This interview is nearly 2 hours long, hence why I and the team are breaking it up into two segments. And T and I disagree on a ton of stuff in this interview. And in part, I think that adds to the value of this interview. And we also broadly talk about a ton of different topics, but also get into the weeds on some more specific pieces. Some of the broader themes that we discuss here are the broader critiques of the effective altruism community, as well as the existential risk community that T have, some mutual critiques of the rationality community, specifically around underemphasizing peer review, as well as just broader concerns about the accuracy of scientific discourse. And we also dive into specific concerns around existential risk from AI and some of our disagreements there. So a big thanks to TTotal for coming on the show. I really appreciate having him on, and I'm really excited to have him on in the future, despite our disagreements. I think that this was a really good exercise in epistemic humility and just good conversational norm. So a big shout out to T. Thank you for coming on. I'm excited to have you on the future. And to you, the community of listeners out there, thank you so much for the support. It's so much fun to see you guys engaging with the content. And I always love to hear your guys' thoughts. So please feel free to like and leave any ratings down below, or let me know how we can improve the show to make it better in any way that you feel like is worth sharing. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys for part 2 of this interview next week. And without any further ado, here's my interview with TTotal as well. Thank you so much, T, for coming on. This is currently called On What Matters. We'll see if we stick with that name or not. But thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, and I'm really excited for the conversation we're going to be having today. There's a mixture of subjects, but I think the right place to start off is by having you tell me and the audience a little bit about who you are and what your areas of focus and expertise are.
Okay, yeah. So I'm maintaining pseudonymity for now, but I go by TTotal on a bunch of different sites. And my area of expertise is that I have a PhD in it's sort of a mix. It's like computational chemistry, physics, engineering sort of thing. But essentially about doing material science computationally, and doing simulations and effective simulations of materials and how they work and so on.
Nice. How did you initially get interested in that area? What was kind of the arc there?
Yeah, it was the arc there was I was originally working on different sorts of renewable energy technologies, so that was part of what I was studying. And then I started doing a PhD, and I just sort of fell into it. It seemed like an area which played to my strengths, which is I'm better at doing coding and stuff in my brain than doing stuff in the lab. I get all sweaty in the laboratory, so and so I just sort of ended up focusing more on that.
Nice. So, one of the reasons why I reached out to you to have the chance to speak was some of your articles on the Effective Altruism forum. The spot that's trying to save the world one forum post at a time, famously. But your forum posts have a different atmosphere. They have a different vibe to them, for lack of a better word. I'm really exposing my Gen Z ness right now. But your articles have a much different feeling to them, I would say. And I wanted to bring you on to have a candid discussion with you about not just EA and some of your reservations about it and about the rationality community, but also about some of your kind of origin points for those critiques and how it connects specifically to the area of expertise you just discussed. So you have a piece. Is it band gaps, brains, and bioweapons? What's the?
Yeah. So
Can
that's
you
the
tell us a little bit about
one.
that?
Yeah, so that's up on my site. So it's band gaps, brains, and bioweapons, the limits of computational science. And I think this is one of the areas where I sort of differ with some of the common memes around EA and the existential risks and so on. Because when I look into that sort of thing, I'll see people state something like, "Oh, like the advent of AGI will be it's this dichotomy of like it either kills us or it ushers us into a utopia." Um,
Yeah.
and personally, I think people are underestimating the difficulty of doing things like not just anything, like things in general. Like people think that like once you can fold proteins, the next you can simulate the universe or whatever. But it's actually the difficulty of everything is ranges by so many orders of magnitude that you're not like it's not like a yeah it's they're not comparable, like the difficulty of different things. So like one of the
And oh, sorry.
yeah, I mean what I'm doing, so one of the things I have worked on is we're trying to work on semiconductors and try to model like one simple material of a semiconductor, like the band gap, which is how much energy you can get out of it if you make it into a solar cell. We'll just put it at that to simplify. It's like it can be 1 or 2 or 3 or so EV, and like there's no and to figure this out accurately, you need to solve the Schrodinger equations of quantum mechanics.
Oh, pretty easy stat.
Yes, exactly. So the
Walk in the
problem with
park.
that, yeah. I mean, the problem with that is that you can't do that. And the reason you can't do that is not that we don't know the equations. Like, we know exactly what equations we'd have to do to predict this material property. But if you try and do those equations and solve them numerically, you'll have the like. So it's okay. I've got one here. So you want to describe the wave function for a salt crystal with 21 electrons, and you want to like just approximate that with like 10 points across, one each. The number of terms in your equation is something like 10 to the 84. It's like it's just not going to happen. Like none of this you can do exactly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the arguments here is, or the main kind of thrust of the article, it seems, is, correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to make sure I'm understanding it properly, is that this jump from superintelligence, right, that a lot of people in the X-Risk community are concerned about potentially going wrong, and turning the entire universe into paper clips or something, or having this kind of fork where it then goes into this like post-scarcity utopia, right? I oftentimes think of like Star Trek as the good outcome for the future. The argument you're making is like, with this area of physics as an example, the amount of like computational complexity there, it's not exactly clear that a system that is even, a million times more intelligent than we are could necessarily figure that out in a easily implementable way. Like this jump from like us now to super intelligence, it like, even if we have systems that are substantially better than we have right now, that doesn't mean it's necessarily being integrated into all the world systems in like 5 years or 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, for a lot of cases, it's just the difficulty of the problem, and there's things that are just outside of the capabilities. So that's for a thing where you know the equation. But for lots of things that we're doing, like there's unknown variables and like hidden things we can't see. And like a computer does not have access to that information, and if you don't have that access to information, you're inherently not going to be able to predict with 100% accuracy what's going on because you don't have all the relevant information.
Do you think that, so let me try to, I'm going to try to select my words carefully here. It seems that this is partially based off of like a sense that like new information couldn't be discovered, developed with these systems, which is certainly true for like systems right now, or maybe like I'm like 90%, 95% sure that that's the case for systems right now, that like new information isn't exactly like being created. It's, like LLMs are just predicting the next token, right? In a more and more complex way each generation, it seems. But it does seem like, at least axiomatically, for example, with math, there are certain areas where like genuine mathematical discoveries do seem like they're viable from future AI systems that we might have in the next 3, 5, 10 years, depending on people's timelines. Do you see that physics is like a unique example of like physical sciences where the computational complexity of like scientific discovery doesn't really merit the same concerns about superintelligence? But are there other areas where, let's say for mathematics, that's more axiomatic, where you do feel like there would still be fundamental breakthroughs that are not exactly orchestrated from the old human meat brains going forward? Like, do you see AI potentially doing that for mathematics, but maybe not the physical sciences?
Yeah, so I'd say one thing about mathematics is that you don't need to interact with the real world to get information from it, right? So,
You're telling me I can just do math from, I don't know, some isolated place that's away from any social gatherings? What?
yeah, so I
What?
mean,
I can create calculus while not talking to people? What? No way.
yeah, so I don't think physics is any different from the other of the life sciences in that, you know, like every simulation you try to make of the universe is going to be an approximation because you don't, in order to simulate the universe, you need as much computational power as the universe, and you don't have that. We have like just classical computers, and even quantum computers won't have enough. Like,
Mm.
so it's all a matter of approximation, right? And it's all a matter of how good your approximations are. Because, like, okay, for some things, if you want to like model a bridge or whatever, then you don't need to go down to like quantum mechanics, and you don't need to know
Yeah.
all that little stuff, and all the unknown information isn't as important because you got just this stuff on it. So if you're simulating a bridge, yeah, you don't need to simulate the entire universe.
Thank
So
God.
it's
Otherwise, structural engineers could never. The feud between structural engineers and architects, where like structural engineers have to like rein in architects for like wanting to build a bridge that just like doesn't have foundations and shit like that. Just like classic stories of architects going way off. I don't think that the sort of infrastructure engineers would be able to rein the architects in if they had to explain quantum mechanics to them. It would be all bets would be off for architects being reined in. But sorry.
yes. Well, please, even quantum mechanics people don't understand quantum mechanics. It's
Exactly.
so
No
they
offense to any
understand how
architects listening.
they understand how to do it. They don't understand what it fucking means. But the numbers come out anyway. But yeah, anyway, so I'm saying it's all approximations. It's all, so it'll be on a case by case basis that there are some things that you will have enough information to create a simulation of that will be reasonably accurate for what you're trying to do. So
Mm.
obviously like AlphaFold, that was a very impressive achievement. Like, so it turns out that was a problem where they could predict that particular problem with reasonable enough accuracy. But like, it's still not 100% accuracy. If they're trying to make it 100% accuracy, that probably won't ever happen, right? Like,
Mm. And
so
this. Oh, sorry.
yeah, you can go on.
No. What were you gonna say?
So I was going to say that, like, it's all part of a broader point I've been trying to make, is that computers will be imperfect. They'll obviously be imperfect, and they'll make mistakes, and they'll always make mistakes.
Do you
And
think
that's not,
the
yeah, that's, in fact, it's not even fair to say it's a mistake. It's just you don't have all the information, so you get it wrong some percentage of the time. Like,
so incomplete information will contribute to incomplete assessments, right? You can't do the equation with half of the variables filled out. This
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah. Do you think that the upper bound of increased computational or scientific sort of breakthroughs will go up as AI breakthroughs continue to happen? Or are you skeptical of even AI like frontier models over the next few years meaningfully contributing to different types of scientific breakthroughs in physics or bio? Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts here. Just like maybe not the like world transforming, but like aiding and really, really increasing the power of research.
Well, what breakthrough? Machine learning's been a part of computational physics for like a decade now, or more
Thank
than
God.
that. Like, so it's
Okay.
it's not really like that much of a breakthrough. So like the things I see people talk about specifically, like the Gen AI, that like, I mean, what's the latest innovations being tokenization, which like it doesn't help that much with like simulating crystal structures. So like the advantage, so what I've seen from around like the physics departments is the way LLMs get used is for like other like more minor stuff, is like sifting through the literature or something. So they'll be like wow, there's a lot of papers out there, so let's use an LLM to try and do literature reviews better and more efficiently and so on. And
Yeah.
that's about the extent of what LLM is used for, right? Is to sort through how much scientific literature we're putting. But in terms of like machine learning, yeah, that's already been a thing for a very long time. Like, and yeah, it's cool, and we're making advances on it. But it's not that hasn't been any step change since 2022. Like, it's not like we've just been trucking on the same way we've always been doing. It's like, hey, this machine learning stuff is cool. Let's see where we can use it and where we can. Like,
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if, as the complexity of every sort of additional physics breakthrough, for example, continues to increase, right? Now we're looking at like Nobel Prize winning teams being 10,000 people instead of like, a few people in a shed somewhere doing like messing around with like fission. Now it's, in gravitational wave, like observatory. And
I'm
like,
not sure I'd want
Daniel
people in
Holes.
a shed to be doing fission in that shed.
I guess it was under the football field, to be fair. So a
Oh
little bit
yes,
different than a
yes.
shed, but still not much better. um, and now it's like even though we still have the same like 3-person cap, I think, for like the actual award being given out, it's typically being given out to 3 people on behalf of the thousands of researchers, right? In frontier science, frontier like physics, right? And this is true like in other areas. I think agriculture might be like one of the exceptions here. Is like a lot of my friends are like doing research in ag here, and are like, it's a team of like 5 people who are meaningfully contributing to like humanity's ability to feed itself. That's really cool, right? But most of the time, these the size and coordination level for breakthroughs is just radically scaled, and it'd be interesting to see if like instead of having a step up from frontier AI models, like fundamentally changing how quickly we like understand the physical realm, if it kind of just helps kind of like even out this massive increase in coordination problems for research, right? And if it just like kind of helps us keep pace with like current discoveries because of like the increased like ease of use or ease of research or something, helping to kind of like weigh against this increase in like number of people who are needed for a piece of research.
Yeah, and I'll say there's other places where I use LLMs, and that's in doing really easy coding things that they can't be like they're kind of annoying, and also like people use it to write grant applications and so on, and stuff that doesn't actually matter. Like,
Oh man,
it's a productivity tool. Like that's mainly what it is. It's like, but I don't see any step change in scientific discovery occurring as a result of GPT-4 or GPT-5 or even GPT-6. Like, I don't like.
I think I'll push back here a little bit, and I would love to hear your thoughts here. I think one of the origins of a step change that I think is more likely than not to happen, and potentially happen relatively soon, is going to be highly agentic or autonomous AI systems that are able to be multimodal, are able to not just complete digital tasks, but potentially have integrations with broader like research tools like that are physical, are able to help coordinate researchers, are able to not just do like lit reviews, but are able to do lit reviews, figure out better questions, and start pursuing those questions. That seems like something that would be a fundamental shift, right? That would be the shift from a productivity tool to a agent doing things on behalf of researchers. That seems like a meaningful difference. And I want to ask your thoughts on have this kind of question of agentic AI. You might be skeptical of them being possible. You might be skeptical of their potential impact. You might not have any interest in autonomous AI at all. But I would love to hear your thoughts here, because I feel like that is where the biggest breakthroughs will happen.
So it sounds like what you're describing to me, like, just sounds like another productivity tool. Like,
wait, how so?
It's just you're just doing the same thing as before. You're using it to do a bit of code better, and you're doing it to do a bit of lit review better. And it's just like you're doing like 1 or 2 extra steps of like the busy work and so on.
Versus like doing the kind of fundamental the science and the scientific research type like workflow. Okay.
Yeah, and certainly nothing with like I wouldn't trust an LLM to write a paper. It's like you need a human in the mix to like have some accountability, that's like into checkability and so on. Like,
yeah, at least I would say, at least for now, right? Because I think that, and this I think is one of the biggest areas. Also, this is just so fun so far. Thank you so much. This is great. But I think one of the biggest areas that I am concerned about here is with autonomous systems, keeping humans in the loop might not be as necessary as it is now. Like, we might have to fight for keeping humans in the loop. And there's like, the arguments that I agree with from Hol and Karnofsky around like economic competition leading to autonomous AI just like slowly being incentivized more than like having like humans actually like checking and like monitoring AI systems for like any sort of like corporate or like shareholder like value maximization type situation or enterprise. It might just be that autonomous AI is like the only way to stay competitive there. But I think in a more narrow sense here of autonomous AI systems, the main kind of difference between current LLMs is just that like you don't need humans in the loop at every step. And they can also do like they will be able to do long form task planning as well as execution, right? And it seems like there is enough reason to think that especially ones that have like the ability to modify themselves, that can like potentially add new integrations, and especially with like the advent of like robotic integrations with these systems that a ton of labs are already working on. I think that we're building out the ecosystem right now that autonomous agents would be able to take advantage of in 5-10 years. I think my timelines are probably around 5 years for like AGI in like an LLM type situation. But these autonomous agents do seem like they would change in a more fundamental way than just like being a productivity tool, in addition to that.
So I think my problem with all of that picture is that they're going to be buggy as hell, right? Like
initially. That's true. Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
Go help me do this ag research. And it comes back and it's just like bred foxes into dogs. You're like, I asked you to research wheat. What are you doing? It's like completely off the wall, random stuff it's doing.
Yeah. I'm not sure you can like, I'm not sure you can get anything that's like not buggy, because ultimately not buggy means it's doing the things you want it to do, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter why something's not doing what you want to do. If it's not doing what you want to do, it's like that's a bug, right? And so like people don't like to rely on on code that's buggy and you don't know why, and you can't go in and debug it and like.
I will say, I think this is a slight tangent. But speaking of like the interface of like scientific discovery and technology, one thing that's been really interesting to see with like many of my friends here who are doing their PhD research in different like physical science areas is how often the lab software they're using was made by like some undergrad in CS like 10 years ago. And then like some random master's student who like took a bit of CS, like expanded it in this way. And then now PhD students who like don't do any CS, but have had just like learn code, have like added additional things. It's just like Frankenstein software is what I call it.
Oh god. Don't get me started on physicist code. It's
I will get you started. Tell me about physicist code. This sounds horrible.
It's really bad. Well, the way physicists
is it a simple kind of build out?
Yeah, because the physicist code is like we want to be doing physics. We don't want to be coding, right?
Yeah.
So you just do the absolute. So the calculation a physicist makes is like, what is the minimum amount of time I could spend on this code that will get it to do what I want now? And I'll tell you, that's not the amount that makes it easy to maintain later on, or like.
Yeah,
So everything's written. Yeah, everything's written with the idea that like nobody will come in there and poke at it later. Like,
yeah, there's no there's no notes in there. There's no explanations of what things do. It's an absolute night. I looked at it's a nightmare. It is genuinely a nightmare. I think that universities would probably. This is a hot take I have for any research university admin listening, which I severely doubt. But if anyone out there is listening, please invest in CS students having projects where they help research labs build better, more robust software. Because the number of hours of like research hours that are probably wasted every year at like world-class labs probably is like way too high in terms of wasted research hours.
Yeah. And this is one of the areas where like AI, I could conceivably see like doing a lot of productivity speed up. Like,
thank God, like improving that would be, that itself, I think, would really alleviate a lot of suffering among PhD students who don't need any more suffering in their life. Famously. Oh man, I'm sorry to hear it. Also, is an ailment among physics softwares as well.
I mean, it's all over the place. Anywhere where the code isn't commercial, right? It's just I feel like the internal code of like a lot of places is dodgy.
100%. Yeah, I really think a major like private venture that I think would be kind of fun to do would just be, hey, let me improve your like your lab's research, or like let me improve your internal company or like organization's internal like software with like a bit of code and like a couple CS people. Because like Jesus Christ, it probably costs like millions of dollars a year collectively in terms of wasted hours. NSF, I think, would be happy to fund something that's like, hey, let's make sure your people are not wasting hours with like shit code. But nonetheless, annoying code aside, I also wanted to hear some of your thoughts on your piece from December 2023 about Yukowski being wrong about covalently bonded equivalence in biology.
Oh, that was a controversial
can you dive in that? Hey,
that was that's why I'm having you.
I
got some pushback from Yukowski himself on that one. Oh, that took a
while. I'm excited to hear about this. So it's a fairly long piece, I will say. I wasn't able to get through all of it before us talking today, but I would love to dive into it a bit with you.
Yeah, so maybe I should start with the nanotech stuff, because that's been sort of the motivation thing. So with nanotech was like I was looking online. And I was trying to study, like, so everyone has this, like, oh, AI will kill us all. AI will kill us all. The question,
well, not everyone. Sam Altman.
Some people were saying that, and like the question I always ask for these people is like, how is it going to kill us all? How is it going to kill us all?
The kill scenario.
Yeah, the kill scenario. And when I look into it, like, there's this article called "List of Lethalities." Which talks about how we're all doomed and everyone's going to die.
The article critiques Yukowski's repeated claims about biology, particularly the assertion that proteins are primarily held together by weak van der Waals forces rather than stronger covalent bonds. The author argues this is scientifically incorrect, explaining that proteins are mainly composed of covalent bonds, with secondary hydrogen forces contributing to structure. The critique emphasizes the importance of accurate scientific analysis, especially when discussing topics like nanotechnology and AI-driven risks.
Outlines some plausible or potentially plausible kill scenarios. And you don't seem particularly convinced, and I. Oh my God. But how did that lead to this article?
Oh, bad.
Okay, let's dive into that and kind of how it connects to this longer post you wrote up in partial response.
It's
what's the most striking about it, do you think?
I don't know. It's a 6-step plan, like, and it's all of the steps are insane. It's like it gets access to the internet emails DNA sequences into, and it's like, so the idea is that the AGI emails a bunch of researchers in a lab, which mix a few protons in a beaker, and those protons suddenly become a nanofactory. And then that nanofactory suddenly builds a second nanofactory, and that second nanofactory becomes omnipotent and like grows infinitely and like builds stuff everywhere.
Scientific accuracy. The article argues that
oh god. And then it's so. Yeah, and then it builds these self-replicating nanomachines which spread over the world, and they kill everyone all at once in an instant on a timer. And he put this as his lower bound scenario. It was like, this is the easiest scenario. I'm like, well, that's a sigh of relief, because that's fucking impossible.
Yeah. It's always been a striking piece of the article is that is the scenario he decided to go with, right? It seems like it seems like there are more plausible scenarios than this. However, I think in the effort of demonstrating one scenario, it kind of like the cards are sometimes stacked against those explanations, because it's like you have to say, well, if this thing happens, then this thing, like it's all speculative, right? Inherently,
it's a chain of events, and all the chains and all the links in the chain are incredibly weak.
yeah, and I think that's like one of the biggest challenges of communicating about AI risk is, and this is coming from someone who strongly believes that AI is like, it does hold a real potential for how do I put this elegantly, like fucking killing everyone, and I'm really concerned about it, right? Like very much so. I know we disagree on this, but I will say it's like it's not exactly clear if Yudkowsky writing stuff like that is productive for the debate, because in the efforts of outlining speculative kill scenarios, it kind of like sets the tone as, well, it's only scenarios like this that could take us out. It's like, kind of. There's also
I think that's what. But the thing is, I think that's what Yudkowsky believes. If he believed in Karnofsky type situations, he'd say that. That would be his lower bound. This is his lower bound.
Well, unless if it's because he didn't think about it, is why he's I don't like it because I didn't think about it. Just kidding. Just kidding, Yud. Or any Yud fans out there. Yeah, that's... I can see that. Yeah, he also wrote this piece long before I think the Karnofsky article, right? Because it's... When did the piece come out? Yudkowsky.
Anyway, I don't think it's that important, because I don't respect Yudkowsky as a thinker. So.
Has that always been the case?
Yes. Since I've encountered his work, it's just been the work of an overconfident braggart. Like, and it's just there's so much. Anyway.
It's kind of funny. Like, he has grown on me in some like weird ways I wasn't anticipating, but I still feel like a lot of my disagreements are around not like a lack of awareness, just a lack of like accounting for fully the influence of like social dynamics on epistemics, right? And like the meaningful influence on our epistemic environment that various traps, or so-called epistemic traps, a concept that like me and Matthew Gensel, who's one of the researchers I work with, have been like really interested in thinking about. And it seems like one of the major pitfalls of components of the rationality community that have taken until fairly recently to start getting accounted for in a serious way are these concerns around fundamental epistemic traps that are just really hard to escape as humans, right? And I think that this connects to the kind of omnipotent AI concerns of the rationality community, where if you believe that if you sit and think really hard and like really clearly, you can come to like the like perfect or like, you know, best assessment of the world around you, like that's a claim that I can see and that I agree with, right? Like I think thinking about the world.
Sorry. Wait, you agree with that?
No. So I agree that you can come to like a better assessment of the world. However, and this is the area where I diverge from these groups, is I think that you need to engage with like different viewpoints, right? This is not controversial in most other circles. You have to engage in with like alternative viewpoints, because like there are going to be components of your worldview that are inherently wrong, and that you need to kind of like find the right in the wrong and the wrong in the right with, right? Like you have to, not to sound like too Hegelian here, but I do think Hegel is quite spot on, in the sense of like you have to participate in a dialectic process. And it seems like this kind of isolated, siloed rational exercise from individuals misses this like important component of like what has made humanity so potent when it comes to uncovering truths about the world. It's our social components, and a lot of the sort of discourse around the intersection of epistemics and like social stuff in the rationality community, I think is oftentimes kind of like diminished the usefulness of social epistemics, right? If anything, it's sometimes framed it as the enemy. And I think that is a framing that's counterproductive for actually discovering truths about the world, right? And then actually building like a better world, right? Is you have to engage with other people and other sets of ideas in a way that like is like respectful. I think is like a fundamental value here that I think does actually contribute to better epistemics in long term. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the epistemic flaws are way bigger than that.
Okay, tell me about some of these arguments.
So, okay, I mean, so like recently I've been reading a bit on the philosophy of science. And
nice.
What I see as the rationality community is that they've attempted to reinvent the wheel of science and create an alternative epistemics to science, and they've done it very badly, and haven't learned the lessons of science, and haven't like understood what it is that makes science tick and work and so on.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more here of like some of these, like some of the kind of specific components or some of these lessons?
One easy thing to discuss is peer review, right? So peer review, if you go into these sort of rationalist things, they'll be shitting on peer review. They're like, it makes everything so like it takes so long, it's so like acrimonious, and then like a bunch of stuff gets by anyway. It's like so it's like we'll do science without peer review. But what they haven't noticed is that like that takes away literally all the defenses against bullshit. And there aren't any defenses against bullshit in if you just think about like all these like blog post based discovery of the world, there's no way to distinguish between someone who's like a convincing sounding like bullshitter and someone who's actually knows what the fuck they're talking about. Like, they don't have any like the only mechanisms they have in place is that like you hope somebody who knows what they're talking about will randomly stumble onto your post and like write something in the reply being like, this is crap, or that someone will see it and be like, write a really, really long blog post rebuttal about it. And it's like, why would someone do that? Like,
I mean, someone would do that within a community that has norms, I would say, of doing that, right? However, that still fails in a major part. Like, I think it's a part of the kind of approach baked into the culture, right, of the rationality community. And again, like I'm not trying to mischaracterize the rationality community like here whatsoever. So please, in a weird meta way, please do exactly what we're talking about right now. If someone's listening is like, I disagree with this, let us know, and I'd be more than happy to like explore this, right? But it does seem like when there's a norm of responding on these posts, that does set up a type of like review, but I think it doesn't select for it in a way that's systematic, that actually like delivers the real value of peer review.
It also doesn't select for truth. It doesn't select for expertise. It doesn't select for knowledge, right? Because it's like it's on upvotes, right? And what's an upvote based on? It's not based on whether you know anything about the subject. It's based on, I like the title. Or it's like, I like this person. Like, they had some nice pictures and witty stuff in there. They sound like they know what they're talking about. So I'll give it an upvote. And it's like, there's lots of upvotes. Therefore, that's the truth. And, you just don't have enough. There's nothing in place to push things towards you're optimizing you're not optimizing for truth. You're optimizing for virality, for the appearance of truth, for the appearance of like looking correct.
Yeah, and I think that appearance is what's being selected for more than the sort of virality component.
Yeah.
Because I think that like things being popular can sometimes have a like I don't know, it's kind of like the normie critique in like rationality, where again, not trying to characterize this or mischaracterize this, but it seems like when something is like mainstream or a mainstream belief, it's more open to being readily accepted as false within sub-communities of the rationality community. And I think that this is... Oh, sorry?
Yeah, well, because it's been set up that like the cool thing to do is to have a contrarian take, right? And so if you read like the original blog post, the sequences, you'll have a bit of a contrarian take on like 15 different little things. You know, it'll be like, oh, like cryonics. If you don't do cryonics, you're a monster. Like nanotech. Yeah, nanotech's definitely coming soon, which is not true. That's
any second now. We'll be dissolved into gray goo.
yeah, and then it's like, oh yeah, nanotech, that's definitely coming soon. The Drexlerian gray roo's coming, or like this and that. It's like, oh, many worlds interpretation is the correct interpretation. If you don't believe that, you're an idiot fool.
That point is crazy to say. Like, that is... Jesus Christ. Sorry, I completely had somehow missed that point that Yukowski makes of like in the sequences of just, he says the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is like the clearly right interpretation.
Oh yeah. And he's like, man. Everyone's absolutely. And he's like, this is proof that science has failed and you should choose Bayesianism instead.
I mean, I love Bayesian like calculations, and the theorem I think is elegant and beautiful insofar as I can find mathematical equations beautiful and elegant while I'm struggling to understand them. But I mean, that is like, that's taking this to an extreme, you know, like that is...
Well, because it's not really Bayesianism, is it? Like,
no, no, it is not.
You read through the entirety of the sequences, and you read through the entirety of like the Center for Applied Rationality handbook. You don't get like I looked through. I couldn't find anything on like Bayesian 102. I couldn't find any fucking like distributions. Like, you know, like,
oh man,
like how do you do the probability of a coin being fair? You know, like they don't get to that bit. Like Bayesianism is just like agree with Yukowski or agree with a rationalist. It's not real. It's not real.
Yeah, and I think it's we might, like, you and I will probably disagree around like the whether or not like the rationality movement has been a net positive or net negative, right? I think that's also like something that's like not yet to be seen. I think it really connects heavily to like AI risk and like whether or not stuff goes bad or if it's actually not a big deal or what have you. However, at the time being, what do you see as having been the largest kind of points of benefit of kind of the rationality like worldview, or do you just see it as like wholeheartedly like bad? I suppose this might be an unfair question to ask, but I want to give you the option to respond to it.
I guess they've helped.
Are you? I guess they've been entertaining.
Like, they've somewhat helped in like growing parts of effective altruism, and parts of effective altruism I think are good, right?
Yeah,
I think even though like donating to malaria nets is not as the picture is a bit more mixed than you might get from like
from Gibwell.
Oh no,
I didn't know that.
I think Gibwell's kind of like Gibwell's generally a bit more like they're a bit more careful these days. I feel like they used to be a bit more yes, we've discovered the secret, but I think these days they're a bit more in the like but yes, parts of EA are good. I think it's good to donate to third world charities. I think it's good to look
you heard
at
it here
things.
first, folks.
So yes, I am glad that like some of that has come over and the rationality has helped grow that a bit. But now I think they're dragging EA down, and I think that they're injecting it with bad epistemics. They're injecting it with the idea that being like an overconfident braggart is a role model thing. It's a good thing to have, and to ignore subject matter experts, to ignore like to ignore the literature, to ignore like academia, ignore like what everyone outside of your little 10,000 people believe. It's just, that's not good epistemics. That's arrogance, and that leads you down into like intellectual black holes and like groupthink and ultimately demise. Like,
the epistemic traps grow with every dismissal of subject area experts, assuming that the subject area experts know their stuff. And I think they probably do. I think it's pretty fair and safe to say, like, oh, if you've spent 25 years researching X topic, you're probably more knowledgeable about that than the average person. And that point is controversial to say in some circles in the rationality community. Like that's a point that like I have made directly, and people immediately are like, oh yeah, but did you see this study? Or oh yeah, did you like see this survey or this EA forum post? Or sorry, this less wrong post. And like this is something that is like, it's interesting to question and think about, but it's hard to navigate life in a useful way when you genuinely believe that subject matter experts are talking out their ass and you actually know better than them because you read a couple textbooks by yourself.
Yeah. Maybe. Well, it's the idea that if you can study something for like you can study something for a week and then know better about it than someone who studied it for like 20 years. It's like
because you're really clever.
Yeah, it's like okay, like sometimes people are wrong, and sometimes subject matter experts are wrong, and sometimes people from outside can spot it. But you have to have a tale for why, and like usually the tale for why, like it's not that I read a bunch of blog posts somewhere, right? You can be like, hey, I'm a statistician, and you know these people that like. Yeah, they're very good at biology, but they're using statistics wrong. So this is why I don't trust them. And it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That might be but it's not. I read a blog post. Like it's not. That's.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is like that critique will like oftentimes you'll have someone who is if they're a human being, they have like mixed motivations for taking up critiques against things, and sometimes you'll have someone who has vested emotional or kind of career interest in proving a group wrong, and who does actually find like a valuable critique of that, right? However, given that we're all working with mixed motivations, there is always a need for a like additional discourse, additional like humble and actually epistemically humble exploration, right, of your claims, right? Like discussions like this, for example, where you go out of your way to make sure that you are speaking with people who like you disagree with on some things and being willing to come to the table and talk about that. It's kind of the next version of the marketplace of ideas, except a little bit more aware of like how heavily slanted the marketplace can get pretty quickly given certain like components of society and whatnot. But like when it comes to discourse, I think that there is a really important lesson from the 20th century and from the history of science, as you mentioned earlier, of being willing to come to the table and say, hey, I think this is the true thing here. Here are the reasons why. Outlining that, having good norms of discourse, having good like epistemic norms, right? And that's something that like a lot of people in the rationality community like really emphasize. And I think there's a lot of things there that are really valuable to like practice and take inspiration from. And being willing to have an actual discussion about what you see as true here, and recognizing that like just because you're really, really confident from, as you said, like reading some stuff on your own, recognizing that like, you probably, there's a good chance you probably don't know better than someone who's been researching this for decades. There's a chance you do, but you have to practice what I call the heuristic. It's something that me and my best friend, Thomas Porter, who is a PhD student at Michigan now in CS, him and I like talked extensively about this of like, hey, if something is a common heuristic in society, you should be careful to throw that out the window, right? You should have a heuristic that assigns slightly higher likelihoods of heuristics being right if they're sticking around for a long period of time. There's probably something to them that's like hard to quantify or hard to fully understand if you just like take an afternoon to kind of dismiss it, right? And I think this is a lesson that's shown time and time again in different circles, whether it's more revolutionary kind of intellectual circles that try to dismiss certain cultural norms in certain areas that like then like crumble and like it doesn't really work super well, to new age like intellectual movements, right? I think that it is hard to dismiss rules of thumb that have been used and deployed for hundreds of years in some instances, just because you have like some brief argument dismissing it, right? Like you have to be really careful about what heuristics we dismiss, right? That's not to say we shouldn't, because there are for sure heuristics that are wrong, 100%, 150%. Human gut instincts are not like right a lot of the time. However, we have to like be careful when we're dismissing certain intellectual heuristics that are more commonplace. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Sorry, that was long-winded, but I really wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't see any problem with that. But another thing, it's just another thing is just the more straightforward things of experts have probably encountered things you haven't and problems you haven't, and the things that sound simple actually are not. So, for example, if I can go back to like the nanotech stuff, like I actually I actually spent quite a lot of time like looking into, because there was an actual research project to build Drexlerian nanotech. Like,
I didn't know that. Oh my god.
Yeah. So Drexlerian.
Also, wait. So for listeners, can you outline Drexlerian nanotech a bit?
Yeah. So that was someone. So Eric Drexler, like
great guy,
way back
really
in
fun.
like way back in like was it the 80s or something? Like way back.
Yeah.
They were like
at MIT.
Yeah, they're like, hey, there's lots of room at the bottom, as Feynman once said. It's like so like maybe what we could do is we could zoom in and we could like create nanoscale structures and they could build things, and we could use that create like a nanoscale factory, and it's sort of like a mechanical analog to bacteria, because obviously some nanomachines do exist, and that's the bacteria in your body, and outside everywhere. And so it is possible to create a self-replicating nanomachine. It's called a bacteria. They're like, hey, what if we threw all of that out and we tried to make it with a bunch of gears and shit?
I'm pretty sure from my conversation with Drexler, that's actually exactly how he put. No, I'm kidding. He did. He put it much more quietly and in a dressed up in a very like nice, cozy like Oxford sweater, just like very calm as an interlocutor.
I mean, so I did take a look at like Drexler's thesis, and like it is. Like I feel like accusations of pseudoscience are like unfounded when it comes to what they're actually publishing, because it's like, hey, I did this, like they did these computational like studies, they did these studies, and they're like, they were like, okay, you can make a gear based out of carbon atoms, and you can make something that looks a bit like a gear, and we did some molecular dynamic simulations, and it won't destroy itself. And so they're like, yeah, so you can sort of build a gear, and that's mostly what it is like stuff around that sort of area.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then it goes on from that. So the problem isn't like the actual thing, and the actual like nanotech. If you actually look at the actual research project which tried to build this, they also aren't doing pseudoscience. They're also like almost entirely theoretical. They're like, okay, how do we build a gear? Like, you know, it's all or nothing to say they want to build a self-replicating nanomachine. So you need to build that up atom by atom. So all they were trying to do is put a carbon atom onto the surface of a carbon surface. That was what they were trying to do. They spent 12 years trying to put 2 carbon atoms on the surface of carbon. They were not successful.
Tragic.
Yeah. So nobody's been able to do that because like when you actually dig into it, the actual dynamics involved are just incredibly different, and things are different at different scales. So you can't just take stuff that's out in the like stuff that works with like a factory and so on, like where you're putting bricks on stuff. It doesn't work because when you're picking up a brick, you're using friction to pick it up, right?
Yeah.
You don't have friction at the bottom level. So like what they were trying to do was equivalent to like putting super glue on your hand, super gluing your hand to the brick, super gluing the brick to something, and then ripping your hand away. Like that's what they were trying to do. Like that's pretty much what they were trying to do with their first thing. And then so they handed it over to an actual so this was a theoretical team, and they were doing like 90% of the work on this was theoretical. They tried to hand it over to the experimentalist, and I actually emailed the experimentalist, Professor Moriarty, great guy. Yeah, and he was like, yeah, we tried to do it, and we couldn't image the surface of carbon with the microscope, so there's nothing we can do.
Damn.
And so he went off and did something else. It's like, and that was the Drixlerian nanotech project. Like,
I really hope there's some future breakthroughs with this. You know, some future applied physicists who are able to not just have it be analogous to gluing your hand to a brick and then trying to glue the brick to the surface.
So you mean like use other forces, like van der Waals forces?
Like what forces?
Like van der Waals forces. So
tell me about van der.
Yeah, so so the thing I was referring to was like covalent bonds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you want to, so yeah, you do want to use things that aren't like gluing things together with covalent bonds, right? So you want to use all four, like all the different forces available for your different functions, right? You want to like, so there's lots of different types of bonds. There's like covalent bonds. There's like polar bonds. Why am I mind blanking on it? It's like one of them is van der Waals forces and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm saying this because this was one of the things that like Yudkowsky brought up as a reason why nanotech would be so much better than bacteria, is because bacteria uses van der Waals forces and nanotech wouldn't.
Wait, so I as a question of clarification, so out of like ionic bonds, metallic, then is hydrogen one too, or is that
hydrogen
I confusing
bonding?
That
Yeah.
Hydrogen bonding, yeah. and then there's like the van der Waals. How is van der Waals bonds like how are those interactions different than the other ones?
They're just weaker, right?
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
That's the main thing we need to worry about. And you want some things to be weaker, and you want some things to be like flexible in that stage because everything's flying around.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you don't want just like everything to be like white knuckles. Hold on.
I mean, so one of the problems I think is with nanotech is that like it's way too rigid. Like you're trying to covalently bond everything together, just way too easy for something to get stuck. And then you try to build these massive nanofactory machines, and they just. Whereas if you look at like a biological cell, everything's based on being loosey goosey. It's like.
Floating around.
Yeah, you can spread around, and it's like, and if you look at how a bacteria is like, if you look at how like DNA builds stuff and like how proteins are built, it's a genius design. Like like all it does is like it prints these amino acids together, like links them up chain by chain by chain, and then as soon as it's out, it like starts whipping around, and then it like just magically finds the lowest energy section, and the lowest energy setting is in this 3D structure that does exactly the thing you want it to do.
Oh,
it's amazing.
So cool.
It's so
beautiful.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's that's another big problem with that is like, why are you trying to reinvent this wheel? Like bacteria have been perfecting this for like, they've been able to do real world experiments for billions of years. And I don't think like you can in a couple of years you can like glue a bunch of carbon atoms together and have it be better than that. Like
it's kind of weirdly analogous to the heuristic, right? It's like, oh, we have this thing that's been tested and that has evolved computationally over like a billion years. It was like 900 million years ago. The first like Jesus Christ, guys. Let's just like I'm all for discovering new stuff. And the power of the human mind and coordinated humans work on stuff.
Sorry, bacteria's been around since 3.5 billion years ago. So it's and that's been over the entire planet, and it's been reproducing every like couple of minutes.
That's right. It was so 3.5 billion years ago, and then the Earth formed around 4 billion, right? So I think it was 900 million years after the Earth formed that bacteria popped up, right? I think that's
something like that. Yeah.
Which is like
billion. Yeah.
Which is crazy. Just like bacteria just like was like, hey guys, now that the world's like, it's not just all lava, it's not just all molten anymore. Some of it still is, but not all of it. Let's just pop up. Let's just start zooming about.
So they've had a crazy amount of time to try stuff out, like.
And that is part 1 of my 2-part interview with TTotal. Thank you so much once again to T, and thank you so much to you, the listener and community out there supporting this channel. I will see you guys next week.